So, welcome to our third creative talk in the Room of Change 2021. So, we are very happy to have you here, and I hope you made yourself comfortable at home. And I can assure you, we can't see you, so do whatever you like. You can eat, drink, hang around in your pajamas. We won't see you. And we just hope you enjoy our talk. I just want to first mention that you can ask your questions to Michelle, and I would highly encourage you to use that chance to ask her things. You can do that with the Q&A tool. If you are watching from an iPhone or a tablet, you have on the top right, you have this button or icon or whatever it is. It says Q&A, Q and A, it's in German. And if you are watching from the desktop or on a computer, it's on the bottom right and it says Q&A. And yeah, you can whenever you have the question, you write it in and then we'll answer it right after our talk. So, why we invited Michelle Grant? We first met her, or we heard about her because of her book, The Great Fool, which you launched at the Birdhouse community space in Zurich. And we were really inspired by the book because she connected knowledge about sustainable food with daily recipes in a very beautiful visual language that totally fitted the zeitgeist. So later we met Michelle at the Creative Talk think tank, and we talked about communities and visions, how we want to live and to work together. And we also get a little glimpse about her work at the ETH in Zurich at the World Food Systems Center, which she founded. Michelle is a great role model for us because she connects like the academic and the scientific world with the holistic human world. And that's why you are here, because how it is written on your book, to live a life full of purpose and joy. That's what we like. At the House of Change, we don't want just to see technology developing, we also want to see humans developing. How do we want to live and how do we want to work? How we can expand and extend our human qualities is very interesting for us, and is what we want to, bring forward and get the focus on. And Michelle lives already that holistic approach that gets everything together, the humans and all the stuff we do and we want to work with. And that's why we are very happy that you are here. Michelle Grant, welcome.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful and eloquent welcome. I don't think I've ever heard myself introduced in such a poetic way. So thank you.
Yes, so beautiful that you are here. Maybe first you want to introduce yourself, because Rafaela and I really love to hear how people get there where they are now.
Sure. It's always a question where to start from when somebody asks you that. Perhaps you already notice it from my accent. I'm not from Switzerland. I'm originally from Australia. And I actually found my way to Switzerland by way of a small flyer that I found in the back hallways of the engineering institute where I was studying in Australia. And it was a flyer for a sustainable development workshop in the Swiss mountains. And the colors of the mountains just really stood out in this gray, miserable building. And so I applied to go to this program. This was like 20 years ago or something. And that effectively brought me to Switzerland. It brought me to contact with this concept of sustainable development, which became then the red thread of my life and led to a lot of different opportunities that eventually had me stay in Switzerland, firstly from a work perspective, and secondly for love, because my husband is from here. So that's sort of in a nutshell how I ended up in Switzerland and why I've been working for such a long time in sustainable development. It was sparked for me in the Swiss Alps. So I'm happy it continues here.
So nice to hear. And you then wrote this nice book, The Great Fool, right? Mm-hmm. But The Great Fool is also like your bigger cosmos around Michelle Grant. Can you explain or elaborate a bit what The Great Fool is?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm also struggling to find the words as you were there. I like cosmos. I'm trying to work out, is it a platform? Is it an institute? Is it an academy? And well, basically the Grateful started when I was working at ETH on this topic of sustainability and food. I was hearing such interesting insights from scientists and thought leaders around the world on this topic, and it just never seemed to get outside of academia, outside of the ivory tower. And so I thought, why don't I make a blog where I link recipes to some of the interesting insights that are coming out of this space in science? And over time, I realized, well, firstly, I'm not a great blogger because I think I posted about once every 3 months. And I realized, well, actually, I'd much rather put this in a form of a book so that people can connect to this understanding of food being at the center of creating positive change in the world, that it has so much potential, and it's something, if we're lucky enough, we engage with it 3 times a day. And so exactly what I wanted to do with the book was help people understand the potential of food to tackle sustainable development challenges, and to see how that need not always be miserable, but it can also be joyful. So finding the purpose in the food can be joyful as well. And as I was going through this process and my work as well, I realized that we don't change anything related to how we eat unless we change how we live as well. So it developed then more to sort of how can we eat and live. And then with time, I realized even more that we're not going to change the systems and change things at the scale we need unless we look at how we lead as well. So now it's a platform that explores what's each of our roles as individuals in building a sustainable world through how we eat, how we live, and how we lead. And now it's evolving into actually an academy and a community, and that's a big focus of my work now, that brings together aspiring female leaders who want to play a role in building a more sustainable world and want to understand what's my role in that, how do my skills and gifts come to meet a need in the world, and how can I build the confidence and I guess courage is the main word to really step into leading change in this space. So yeah, it's now a book, a blog, an academy, a community, and I like that it's this constantly evolving and emerging concept that grows with the people who come to be a part of it.
So amazing. And what you already mentioned is that it has like such a nice undertone, everything you do. This is also what we like, right? That it's so positive. And you work in different settings as a consultant, self-employed, and as an educator at the World Food System Center at the ETH, right? And research and educational setting, but also with private clients. And how should we picture you working? And also what I was curious about, does everything you do fit in one pot, or are you imagining like several different pots for yourself?
It's a very good question, and it's a question that I think I have myself danced with for a long time. On the very pragmatic side, imagining me working right now is how everybody is working. It's like my face on Zoom for most of the day. But what I realized, I guess, in the last couple of years is that of all the different roles I've had, all of the different work I've done, the common thread through all of it is working as an educator and working as someone who helps others understand the challenges we're tackling, the solutions that are available, and most importantly, understand what can their role be in making a contribution somehow. And so, at ETH, obviously, that educator role has a different tone to when I'm running a coaching or a leadership development program. But I sort of, in all of those roles, I'm a teacher and an educator, but in a very interactive way where people go through a process of self-discovery. I think this Socratic approach to learning is super important, that it's not one directional, it's participatory, and that individuals find inside themselves the answers that they're seeking. So yeah.
Nice. And it seems also when I did the research, I mean, we know each other since exactly 1 year, I think so. But I mean, I also did some research about you and your project and all that stuff. And what was very, very interesting for me, also as like a visual person, it seemed for me like a pattern. You're working on the big systems and also on the details, like the individual. And this is something very nice, this pattern, going into the big and then down to the small and then back to the big picture and down to the detail. Is this something I don't know, how do you live with that, or how do you profit from these different perspectives from this pattern?
Yeah. You described that really beautifully. When you're like, I researched you, I wonder what was going to come out of that. And that was a very nice synopsis. Yeah, absolutely. That's something I personally think I've also struggled with in trying to work out how do we make a contribution in the world. You always have these two aspects of changing your own individual behavior, changing things in your micro environment, changing things inside yourself, but knowing without changing the bigger system, it's not going to be the transformation that we need. And so I think having a foot in both of these worlds gives me hope personally. When I'm maybe looking at policy changes or looking at the challenges on a global scale, it can feel very overwhelming because change is slow. It requires a lot of different people to come together. It requires us to change the status quo and institutions. And when that feels overwhelming, then I like to know that I can come back to me as an individual and maybe look at what I'm eating or how I'm living, or the fears and maybe doubts or questions inside myself, and how if I don't work with those, they become the collective experience, right? So I think a lot of the challenges we see in the world today are because there's not enough space for us to work individually on the seeds of that inside ourselves. So yeah, this dance between, let's say, the personal and the societal, or the individual and the collective, individual and the system, it gives me hope to always be able to take action when maybe it feels overwhelming.
And you are educating and talking about those big complex food systems, which you just mentioned, with being overwhelming also. And then you break it down to the responsibility of every ordinary individual. And also you are challenging the question I also saw on your coaching video, on how do we create change and what is my role as an individual in it. And was that a natural process to shift that focus?
I mean, natural, yes, but that doesn't mean without struggle.
Yes, I can imagine.
I think, I've really been through a process myself the last couple of years of working out, how do I want to personally make a contribution? Like what are the gifts that I have, and what's holding me back from sharing them, and what's the space where I can have the biggest impact? And I realized that a lot of people have these questions, and that's also why I trained as a leadership coach, because I want to support people on that journey that I've been through myself. So yeah, I think now I've forgotten the question specifically.
I just asked if it was a natural process for you to be more focused also on an individual, like you do in your leadership programs, and also, but what you do with your book, that you really also encourage individuals to question their own role in it, and also if that was a natural process for you.
Yeah, so I think what was natural about it is that when looking at these big challenges in food systems or big challenges in sustainability, the multiple crises that we're facing, once you're looking at challenges, you want to look at solutions. And then when you start to question, well, we have a lot of good solutions, but they're not being put into practice, how do we actually create change? And I think coming into contact with this question was the evolution that made me come more and more down to this deeper level of the individual. And we have to start the change there if we want it to ripple out to be, bigger in the world. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a funnel in a sense of from the challenges down to where does it start? What's the seed of this?
And I think that's also what speaks so much to us, or that this is like, we hear a lot about like those whataboutism situations, and it can be overwhelming, right? That maybe if you can't like change everything, you can't do anything, right? But so yeah, that was I find it really just very inspiring also to go this direction and take also this challenge.
Mhm. And I think that's an interesting point, and it's something I see a lot. I saw it with myself, and I see it with a lot of people working in this space, is also asking yourself what inside you m- makes you feel responsible for all these issues. There's plenty of people in the world who don't feel responsible for them, and I'm not saying that that's desirable, but often when we dig down, there is sometimes some guilt or some worry about our own worth, that can sometimes be a very unhealthy driver
Hmm.
of wanting to solve all of the world's challenges and help everybody, and feeling feeling that you don't have any worth unless you do that. And I think finding a way to manage that so that you still engage with creating change, but in a way that it's driven much more from, well, this is a vision I have for the future, and this is how I want to step it forward, and this is how I want to bring people with me, rather than, oh, it's my personal responsibility to fix everything in the
Hmm.
world, otherwise I'm not a good person.
Yeah.
So I think that's a dance a lot of people working in this space have to kind of somehow work out how to
Yeah.
navigate for themselves. Otherwise, it's very easy to burn out, to work yourself into the ground, to lose hope, and then it's not either fulfilling or healthy for you, and it doesn't end up helping anybody else either. So over time, that's what I've realized, like the well-being of the world is linked to your own well-being, and you have to always have this supporting the two. And how can you contribute to the well-being of the world in a way that supports your own well-being? So yeah, I think that's important.
This is super inspiring because it is really holistic in itself, that
Mm.
from the human and the world are like one in
Mhm.
itself. And we were talking about this topic, sustainability, when we were talking about the interview with you.
Mhm.
We hear it a lot,
Mm.
and we observe this word is always used with like fair trade bananas, or like commodity trades, or it's often used with
Mhm.
economic in an economic context, but never in a human context.
Mm.
And we think that is very important, that you live a sustainable life, that you live with the resources you have, and that you um, see yourself as a little cosmos or a little earth, and
Mhm.
that you have to be first sustainable with yourself
Mm.
and the people around you, the people who work for you, and all
Mhm.
that stuff, and then go. I mean, anyway, you have to buy sustainable food and all that stuff, but still, we are talking so much about the outside,
Yeah.
but never about the inside. And you were talking about is so, it goes so fast, and you don't realize it, and you are burned out or
Mm.
something like
Mhm.
this. And this is something what I found really interesting and inspiring on your approach,
Mm.
and how come you came from the food system to this personal sustainability. I mean, you already mentioned it, but it
Mm.
would be very interesting to hear.
Yeah. I think one point I can think back to was earlier in my career. I was working in sustainability, as I always have, and I had some tension in my shoulders and headaches, and I started to go to an acupuncturist. And one of the first things he asked me was, where do you work? What do you do? And I told him, and then he asked me, so is how you're living sustainable? And I thought, oh, well, I compost and I do this. And he's like, no, is how you're living sustainable? And that was just this moment for me, like, oh, wow, no. But it kind of kickstarted this whole inquiry process, in parallel to, I guess, my work in this space of exploring yoga and meditation and things to support my own health and well-being. But I almost did that like in secret. I never wanted to sound like a hippie or a very woo-woo or anything. But then I realized that, well, this all helps me feel better. It helps me contribute better. It helps me be a better leader. It helps me lead my team better. So actually, this is all kind of the foundations of supporting ourselves so that we can lead change. And I think that's what I'm trying to do now, is bring these two worlds together, like the pragmatic, scientific kind of analysis side of the challenges and the solutions with the, well, what's the very human side of creating change, and how does it start with us from a foundation that's sustainable. And that's the other thing I came to realize with time. Even if we're talking about what seem like challenges in the natural world, biodiversity loss, climate change, to change those in the direction we want to, it all comes down to human change. It comes down to human behavior change. And the best way to understand that is to start with ourselves and understand how we engage with change and how we try and change things within ourselves. And that's not very easy. So I think, yeah, but it's the best place to start because we're with ourselves every day. So, yeah. And that's definitely, I think, very disconnected in the scientific dialogue around food system challenges, and there seems to be this lack of connection to us as all human beings at the end of the day. It's kind of very in a theoretical space and disconnected from the reality of what it means to be human. Yeah.
And as a leader and coach, you support and educate clients and students in their own change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, you ask many questions.
Yes.
And we also believe that we believe a bit more in questions than answers.
Mm-hmm.
And also we believe that the questions are what drives us.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to know what your understanding is of questions and how do you lead people to be more questioning, and also with your background in an academical career, which is maybe more about solutions than it's about questions. It would be interesting to hear your relationship to questions.
Yeah, it's one that's definitely changed. And I think I would love to see this more prevalent in the higher education system than it is at the moment. There's still very much a traditional approach to teaching in a lot of universities, which is the sage on the stage, right? There's one person that has all of the knowledge and they one directionally give that to the students, and that's called education. When it goes the other way, when let's say students or coachees bring the questions that they're having forward and go through an inquiry process together, is when you have the richest learning. And through my whole coaching training, I think the best thing that I got out of it was this new relationship to questions, and how the most effective way you can help someone change is by asking them very good, open questions that change their perspective for themselves. And, in the past, I think when you start to maybe take on leadership roles and lead a team or anything like this, I definitely had the misperception that, oh, well, now I need to have all the answers. I need to have all the knowledge and I need to do all the trainings. But at the end of the day, you just need to create an open and safe space and ask each other the right questions. And from there, anything can grow and develop. So, yeah, I'd say over the last 3 years, questions have been central to my life, and and also to questioning myself, to have, whether it's a journaling process or something else where you check in with yourself with open questions too, you get some wisdom that you would never necessarily expect to get from yourself when you engage in this internal dialogue like that too. Questioning rather than judging.
Yeah, that's a good division, or how you say it, judging or questioning.
Yeah,
that's interesting what you just said. Good one. I have to I have to note that somewhere. we recorded it. Yeah, good one. Good. We can watch it again. So the topic that you're working is very complex. You mentioned it before. Food production and consumption comes with issues like climate change and social inequality, and the gap between the poor and the rich gets bigger and bigger. And for us, sometimes that can be very frightening and also could end in resignation. How did you find your own language as a leader in this positive way?
It's interesting that you perceive that, because sometimes I'm asking myself, oh, how can I frame that more optimistically? Because sometimes I do feel resigned or deflated or wondering what's the point. And I think that is a part of the process of engaging with change. And we all have those moments. What I keep trying to come back to is this curiosity, right? And that's what you lose when you feel deflated and like there's no hope anymore, is, well, what's one thing I'm curious about, and how could curiosity kind of be like a compass to help me find my way here? So definitely that curiosity helps me connect more to optimism and to more for a vision for the future, rather than a kind of complaining about everything as it is, because nothing feels good if you start to look into all of these issues. And that's been a process for me. And it's also why, like with the podcast at the moment and also with the book, I really wanted to include these kind of good news stories of people who are maybe in their small part of the world trying to do things differently. Maybe the impact's not big, maybe it's huge, but connecting with those people has been like so reinvigorating for me. And it's something that I really love about the podcast is just, yeah, yes, they're overwhelming, but what's the one thing in there that I can play a role in and try and have an impact and find my purpose in, and how can that also be fulfilling for me? So yeah, I think that's not a clear answer perhaps, but it's, yeah, connecting to the people who are the inspiration as well.
Yeah, and also we often hear when we talk about resilience that curiosity is really something that you, especially as creative, can use all the time when something gets different, that you look at it with curiosity. I think that's a very, how can I say it, a perspective of something that everyone can try.
Yeah.
So it's nothing special, just try it with curiosity. I really like that aspect.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this before, but I can come back to it again now because you mentioned creativity and obviously it's central to the work that you do. I think that's been a really eye-opening experience for me the last couple of years, is having been in a very academic environment for so long, I really lost my connection to creativity. And as a child, I used to paint and do all of these different things. And through writing that book and also engaging with your workshops last year, I've come to realize how incredibly important creativity is, for not just for envisaging the future that we want and making that beautiful and appealing, but also to help us overcome the blocks within ourselves to actually bring our gifts into the world. So I know, like, writing the book was such an incredible personal development journey for me, because at every turn I hit all these blocks in myself about whether this is good enough, et cetera, that I had to find a way to overcome. And that's opened up for me this new relationship to creativity and to start painting again and making things. And I love how that feeds into the rest of my work, and it frees me in a way to not feel I need to have the answers, but be curious to go on this journey and see what kind of comes out of it. So yeah, thank you for playing a part in that.
That's yeah, really. But also, I mean, in this, what you just said, you can really like also highlight what we try to encourage people to do more, is doing those things because, like, for the sake of doing it, not because like just use a lot of paper or whatever that you've been using it, but it's the moment you're in when you are creating, right? Or this is what I heard out from you, which is what is so important. The creative part is a very also meditative part, or a part which is very unique, or where you express yourself. I find it, I don't know if you saw the is it a Pixar film, Soul?
I haven't seen
Have
it
you
yet.
have you seen it?
No.
Which they really picture it really nice when people are in this state of
In the zone.
where they are doing something and they're only there, like nowhere else, and that
In the
was
flow.
in the flow. Yeah. And this is why I think creativity or expressing yourself is so important, because in a moment like that you are really like centered somehow. It's you
Yeah, and I also think for me that's where when I connect to joy more easily, and that's why the subtitle of this book was Sustainable Eating with Purpose and Joy, because if you're so focused on the purpose and the outcome, particularly if we look at huge global challenges like biodiversity loss, climate change, hunger, if you're only fixated on when you're going to solve that problem, like that might not be, sadly, in our lifetime. And that means you're completely disconnected from any part of joy in the process. And what I saw so much with my work is just this way of working that was so kind of serious and heavy and dry and not creative. And then I think it's sad because we're trying to create solutions from this space that doesn't have any joy. And so that's what I love in the creative process, is it really helps you practice detaching from the destination as the objective, and that's when you'll feel happy or satisfied or whatever, and rather going through the process and connecting with joy as much as you can along the journey. And that's not easy.
Yeah, it isn't, but it's also what we like so much about, like the word joy in what, like in the same sentence, it's sustainable and purpose, but it's also joy, because sometimes, yeah, you really think there can't be joy if it's
Serious.
yeah, and also purpose maybe mistaken with right or sustainable, yeah, as right and not sustainable as wrong, or like those, if you can
Judgments.
only exist in those worlds, either wrong or right, it's very hard, and I'm quite sure pretty joy free. So that's really nice that you highlight the joy part. And what is your own vision of a change? Like, that's a big question, I know.
For myself or for the world?
Whatever comes into your mind.
Well, obviously, it's a sustainable world, and that's a big word. And like you say, it's been kind of used for everything, which means it's lost a little bit of its meaning. But for me, that means that we see ourselves as human beings as a part of this planet. And I mean, indigenous cultures have understood this for the longest time, but in the Western world, we still see ourselves as somehow detached from the earth, from the natural system, when we're actually a part of it. So I think my vision is that we really understand in an integral way the connection between our own well-being as humans and the well-being of the planet, and that we're every day engaged in actions that support both our own well-being and the well-being of the planet. And that for me starts with us each having the space and the time and the ability to understand how that starts in each of us, and to engage with that again in a joyful and curious way. Because I think that that's where the bigger vision begins. Each of us are seeds for this forest that we want to grow globally. Yeah.
And what do you think is important for leaders who to help creating a change?
So, I mean, so many qualities that I can think of that are sadly not very well reflected.
We have to name them all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something that I'm obviously really interested in recently is these qualities of leadership that are traditionally considered female. So, feminine leadership qualities. So, empathy, open-mindedness, curiosity, an ability to have compassion for others very different to ourselves. And what we've seen in the pandemic, and a lot of research have shown this, but what we know from other crises is that these are the very qualities that you need to manage and deal with crisis situations effectively. But sadly, we have still less than 10% of leaders of large companies or of governments in this world are women. So that's a big passion area of mine at the moment. What are both the systemic barriers to having more women in leadership roles, and how have those things been internalized in anybody identifying as women in a leadership role or wanting to step into a leadership role? So that's what I'm really interested in fostering at the moment. How can we create space inside ourselves for these qualities to flourish, and how can we bring them into the systems that we're a part of in a way that helps us cope with these multiple crises that we're facing collectively on the planet at the moment?
Yeah. And what keeps your spirit high?
Inspiring people like you too. No, absolutely. Like I mentioned with the podcast, just talking to people who have found, normally through their own struggle, their little patch of the garden that they're going to tend to make the global garden a more blossoming place. So I really love hearing stories of people stepping into their contribution. Recently, as I said, creativity. So just painting, making things. Understanding that we're in this constant cycle of creation and destruction, and kind of going with that flow, and bringing through my own creativity, sort of understanding how I dance with that is something I'm really enjoying at the moment. And then the other thing, of course, is just spending time in nature and reconnecting to everything that we're trying to protect and regenerate at the end of the day. So I think those are my big things at the moment, given that we're in an unusual situation where one has to find different sources of inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. Inspiration is so important, and for us, it's also so healthy to meet all of our guests to talk about all the visions of creativity and how a creative life can be, or a creative project, or just to connect with creation and inspiration is something that is so fulfilling, or I don't know, it makes me peaceful just to be in these conversations.
Yeah, and also, as you said, I mean, it's just very inspiring to meet people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like you, like the same you said you do for your podcast. So
To stay in, also to stay in contact. I think for us it was a big question if we want to do the festival or if we don't want to do it. We think January is very important to do a festival anyway, because for us it's like when the darkest time is over, you get in the gray zone. And then maybe you have to create your visions for the year or for yourself or whatever. And then we thought maybe we cannot let the sparkles of all these inspiring people out when we do it online, but still we thought it is so important that we meet people who we think are inspiring, that can other people also met these people. And if it's online and in distance, then so it will be like this. But I think it's very important that we just stay in contact with going out of inspiration and creation.
Yeah.
And you were talking about your podcast, which I really can say, help me with the word.
Recommend, but I feel weird saying that.
I hope it's
recommend.
Exactly.
It's the Great Fool, no? It's I really love the podcast. And in the end, you ask your guests what means for them living a full and great life. And what does it mean for you?
I didn't see that question coming. Well, I mean, when I think about this term, obviously it has a link to gratitude, right? The grateful. It's a play on words there. So this connection to gratitude on a daily basis is so important for me to living well. And I think that it's so important for all of us to, no matter how bad things are, to find that thing that you do have gratitude for, and that brings you into the moment and it grounds you and gives you hope again, I think. But I guess the two words, the great and the full, represent these two things that I'm kind of trying to integrate. And the great is, I guess, the purposeful part of things, the impact, it doesn't mean that it has to be great in the traditional sense of the word, but somehow having an impact that's positive and that feels purposeful. And the full is doing that in a way that's fulfilling for you, that's joyful, that's healthy, that supports your own well-being. So I think it's, again, this combination of the purpose and joy, or the contribution and well-being. It's these kind of two sides of the coin that, for me, bringing them together and integrating them is how I want to live my life. Yeah, that's what it kind of represents.
Sounds very good. We know that a lot of our guests listening to talk are interested how they can commit themselves to a more sustainable life. Is there any practical super hack you could or tips you always share? Or
So I don't want to say I struggle with this question. I'm always very cautious with this question because there's so much judgment around, like you said before, what is good and what is bad. And what a person is able to do to contribute to a sustainable world depends so much on their socioeconomic situation, their cultural situation, all of these different things. So I never like to prescribe too much to people. I rather like to help them understand what are the challenges and help them explore for themselves, okay, what can I do within my context and my restraints, because we all have them, to somehow play a role. And that's particularly true when it comes to food, because food is just such an emotional topic. It's a cultural topic, and everyone's relationship to what they eat is very complex, as is the system that it comes from. But if I can, give one tip that anybody can explore, it's how can I reduce my consumption of animal sourced foods as much as possible in a way that I can, in my cultural context, with my health situation, etc., etc., because we know that that is can have a massive positive impact on the natural world. Basically, it can support the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It can support all kinds of other things that we're trying to work on. So as much as possible, looking at how you could integrate a plant-based diet into your life is definitely a great starting point. Then it's also important to know that that's the start. And if we want to tackle all of the other things, particularly the social issues in the food system, we need to go beyond that. But I do think that changing what you eat is a wonderful starting point to start to understand a little bit better the system and how you can play a role in it. And for some really concrete guidance on that, there was a report that came out 2 years ago now, called 1 year ago, 2 years ago, I don't even know what year it is anymore.
It's difficult.
I think 2 years ago, called the Eat Lancet report. And there they give a recommendation for a planetary health diet that's helpful for the health of the planet and the health of people. And it's a kind of a plate that gives you a guideline of what could be a nice way to eat that's less impactful on the environment.
And what is the name of that again?
It's called Eat, EAT, Lancet. Lancet is a medical journal that it was published in. Yeah, they have a lot of nice materials. It's in the book as well. There's a picture there with the plate.
Cool.
So.
I just also wanted to mention the book again because we placed it nicely here, but like we didn't like presented any sides of it, but it's just such a nice book because it has, apart from a lot of very nice recipes, it also has a lot of information about all those topic inside.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really filled with a lot of information. So I would highly recommend to have this book at home. And also what I find so nice with the book is that you can always like take in the parts you can digest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you just put it aside again, and then you can like really also slowly go into that topic for yourself, and you can also put yourself things out which can be easily managed in your own life, right? So I find it like it's a whole lot of information in that book, and it's really, really nice. And yeah, I think there were so many things I didn't know, of course, but yeah,
That's
it's
nice
really, really nice. So I would highly recommend to have a look at Michelle's book. And also you can find all the information on thegreatfool.com, right? And on Instagram, it's also thegreatfool.com.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the name of the podcast
and
too.
the podcast is also thegreatfool.com. This is very good. So
keep it simple.
Yeah, everybody can find it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we are at the end of our questions. I mean, we could talk for hours, but
we already did talk for an hour before.
There's going to be some questions from our guests at home. So you can still write your questions now. Yeah, and it's from Jess. Hi. She writes, what's your advice for a household in which one partner is passionate and the other is totally unbothered about sustainability? Nice one.
Very good question, and I know this very well. I live that on a daily basis. Yeah, I think it comes back to this idea of questions before, and also values. And I think it's really important that we don't force others into our beliefs or our systems, but we rather kind of have a very non-judgmental dialogue with them and a way of inquiring to understand, well, what are their values? So if you're having, let me just take an example from the air. If you're having a discussion about, well, does it make sense to compost or not? If you can bring it back down to the values, I think that can be a really nice basis for a conversation that doesn't become just a personal fight with one another about who's the good person and who's the bad person. So if somebody maybe values efficiency in the morning because they want to get to work quickly and composting takes too much time. Well, you can then have a bit of a discussion around that and ways you could tackle it together. So I think in my experience, forcing the other person, overloading them with information, nagging them. I mean, I've tried all of these things. They don't necessarily work. But I think through as much as possible, living your own values and explaining to the person why this is important to you. So instead of just, don't throw the scraps in the bin, we compost, rather, I really find it important to compost because it helps close the nutrient cycle. And I really care about this because it helps us build, a more sustainable food system, which helps feed us in the future. Maybe that's a little bit too much, but just rather than the nagging, getting to the why and the value underneath, I found helpful. And I don't know if I should say this, my husband might get angry at me, but actually over time, he really hasn't had when we met, he had no relationship to this concept of sustainable development, and over time has started to go a bit on his own journey and, stopped eating meat last year, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Because yes, he's been exposed to the topics through me, but through that he watches his own films or hears about it from someone else. It's rarely because of me, but I think maybe I've helped open the door to a curiosity, which then he follows himself and based on that takes actions that, align with his values and are not just me nagging him all the time. So
But I mean, anyway, I do believe like those, like the openness, or it would be interesting to hear it from you, the openness to topics or the importance of special things or how you should do things or why you would eat this. I experience it as like something which is you are ready when you're ready.
yeah.
But I mean, this would be another big question or another big discussion on how things should be regulated and stuff. But I think that's also, something which I experience, which sometimes something clicks with you that you think, oh, I don't want to eat that anymore.
And I also find that what clicks with one person is so different to what clicks with another. Like there's a lot of documentaries in the food space that are quite sensationalized. Some of them problematic, but some of them actually have played such an important role in changing people's perception. Like if I think about my husband, he watched this movie I think it's called Game Changers.
Yeah, no,
which
one?
Had some issues with on a scientific side, but I felt overall the message the way they were sending was super important, and that resonated with him. And in my experience, a lot of men in a way that it just didn't resonate with me at all, and created this change in their lives that I was like, well, I've been saying these things for years, but that film somehow delivered a message and spoke in a way that I can't do because it was talking to values and pain points of people with different lived experiences to me. So that's why I do think it's important we have all these different ways of sharing the information and helping people connect with the topic, because what resonates with one doesn't resonate with another.
Yeah.
And
also I think you want to go on your own journey with that topic, no?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think as sisters, I know it's very good. Someone knows something and you would love that, and somehow I just want to go my own way.
Yeah.
Maybe then I click in and I do something like she does, but I want to do it.
Me.
Yeah. But I just want to go my own way. I want to make my own Erfahrungen, experiences, and all that stuff. And then when I'm there, we can meet at this point. But somehow, I think the closer I am to the people, the more I want to go on my own journey.
Yeah.
Somehow. I don't know.
I think that's so true. And it comes down to this education role again, right? I mean, you're trying to educate another person, and the most effective way to do that is to help spark inside them the questions and their own journey, rather than sadly the way we do tend to teach at universities of like, this is the knowledge, this is what you have to do. It's not effective at helping people change behavior. Yeah. And the other thing I would say to that is tiny steps and tiny habits, just starting small, because often we have this really overwhelming idea of what we have to do if we want to have an impact. And it's like, well, overnight I'm going to be completely vegan and I'm never going to fly again and all of these things, which would have a big impact. But if we try and do it overnight, it's not necessarily possible. So just starting small and growing from there is important.
I just had to laugh because it's the typical thing when someone makes a sign and everybody thinks it's a sign, but it's actually just a scratching.
Exactly. What are you trying to tell us?
Yeah, I can't understand you. And Katrin is asking, what gives you currently most pleasure in your work?
Very nice question. Back to the joy. So at the end of last year, I started a program for women who work in food or sustainability topics, and it's a leadership and coaching development program. So we go on a journey for 4 months together. It was an experiment for me. I wasn't sure how it would work, and it was just the most uplifting experience. We had an incredible community of women. They were all just so engaged. They supported each other so much. It gave me so much hope for the future that these are the type of people that want to lead change. So we're just wrapping up that first version now, and I've just opened applications for the next round. So seeing these applications come in and the women's stories and what they want to do is just super inspiring. Gives me a lot of joy, and that's why I'm now building this community, because I just realized that community is so critical to creating change, both to support ourselves and each other in the process and to get inspiration to co-create and build new things. And that was interesting. That was the theme of the workshop you did a year ago. I think community
Commitment without binding.
Yeah,
Commitment without binding,
you-
or community without binding? Commitment
it was
without binding.
community without.
Oh, the second one was we transformed it. The first creative community think tank was with
Connection.
no, wait.
Too many C
the
words.
the first think tank was on the topic commitment without binding, and in this think tank we transformed the wording in our discussion to connected in freedom.
Ah, that's right. And
was
then
it
I
like
somehow
this? We talked a lot about community. It was all
Exactly.
about community.
And I have a nice painting still from it that was like freedom in community.
Yeah.
I remember that was anyway, I found freedom in community, and that's why it's important for me to build this community now. And just to see how important that is. I realized it's the community I think I needed my whole career. And I'm just really happy to be a part of that and build that and co-create that space with others.
And one can still subscribe for the program, or is it still already closed?
No, applications are open until 8th of February, and we're going to start already in mid-February. And it's a 4-month program. It's all online, which is nice. And we have people from all around the world, which makes it a really rich experience. And this year I've become very passionate about making inspiring, interesting and engaging online learning formats. So that I think that worked well last time. And so anybody that gets shivers when they hear about an online experience now, just to say that we found a way to do that, and that was very energizing, which was nice.
It sounds very interesting. I'm very interested in this program, but maybe you can just tell us on who does fit in your program.
Yeah, I mean it's quite broad in the sense that it's anybody who wants to or is already working in the space of sustainability or food systems. So there might be early career or mid-career, and most people are already maybe in a role, but they might be wanting to understand better exactly what is my contribution in this role, or they might be really wanting to move into this space and shape it from scratch. So basically there are 3 modules. The first one is sustainable change, where we look at, well, what are the foundations of creating change and how does that start inside ourselves, and how do we take care of ourselves in a very integrated way through this process. The second one is about community and communication, so how we create change through bringing people together and the role that communication plays in that, and how to build our own skills with that. And then the last module is looking at callings and courage, and that's more kind of, what are my gifts, how do they interface with the need in the world, and how can I build the courage and the confidence to step into that going forward. And it's very much about practically applying these things in life, not just kind of thinking about the ideas. So,
But if someone would be unsure if he would fit into this program, could they just get in contact with you somehow, and you
So on my website, it's called Be the Change, the program. And on that page, you'll find my email address and also a place you can leave a voice message. And then I just send a voice message back with any questions that you have. So, yeah.
And then another one from Katrin. She says, such interesting insights. Thank you so much. Also, how do you nourish yourself to stay curious?
Oh, thanks, Catherine. Great questions. Well, also there, I think the nourishing with food plays an important role. Like I know for me, what I'm eating is a great indicator of how I'm living. Like if we were talking about this before, like if I'm really busy and stressed and snacking and not sitting down and preparing proper meals, then I know that's an indicator my life is a bit out of balance at the moment and I need to ground again. And so actually really cooking healthy food, engaging with food, that nourishes me not just in terms of looking after myself, but it nourishes me in that it provides some grounding in my life and some sort of space to breathe and reconnect. So like I really like to kind of meditate while I'm cooking, like just chopping the vegetables. When you're chopping the vegetables, as silly as it sounds, it's incredibly difficult. But I find those are little pockets of space that give me nourishment for the rest of the work that I do. Was nourish the curiosity, huh? Yeah, and
Curious, yes.
yeah, and I think what I said before is these connection to interesting people doing new and different things and connecting to people who have had the courage to leave the status quo, to leave the existing system and somehow try their own thing, because that comes with so much fear and so many risks that I think the people that have gone through that process always really inspire me with their perspective on life. I think the final thing that really helps me is, I always never know how to talk about this without sounding really woo woo, but this, like, I have a daily meditation practice, and that time and space to connect to something bigger than myself and to understand that at the end of the day, I'm kind of a channel for something bigger. And that is when I can connect to that, that's when I feel the most curious and the most inspired, because the ego is out of the way and you're much more grounded in being a part of a connected whole. I can't ever find the words to express that without sounding too.
I already feel it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, the creativity is amazing for that, because if you're not kind of being a clear channel for this process, you're going to feel blocked creatively. And so it's interesting to explore in those blocks what's actually going on here. Yeah.
Very nicely said. So, I mean, we have the pleasure to talk to you even further. But yeah, I think I give the word to you, right?
Yes. Thank you very much, Michelle.
you.
It's
Thank you
always
both.
so good to talk to you. It was very uplifting and inspiring. I'm here to give you just a little preview to our next talks and events. Tomorrow we will meet the experience and interaction designer Jan Pistor. We will talk with him about how we can meet in online spaces and still have cultural events or informal events, like when what informal events are just like moments where we meet each other without any goal. So we talk about this, and we talk also about his co-production, co-creation laptops in space. It's an interactive program where we can meet together in space. We will try this together tomorrow, and don't be shy. He will take us by the hand and introduce us to this platform or space, these laptops in space, and we will meet each other also there. So it is a nice chance to get a little bit more about the thoughts and creativity of someone who is working on a daily basis with crazy technologies. For me, it's always, how can I say it? I think it's very important that we still know that these technologies are here to use it creative. It's not just zeros and ones that we can just use as numbers. We can create something out of that. And even if we are all tired of all these online gatherings and get-togethers, it's still a time to create these spaces and to take them for ourselves and to discuss how we want to meet in these spaces and how we want to act and how we want to be together there. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this meeting with Jan Pistor. He does a lot of beautiful projects, interactive and installations, and I really like his kind of speaking about all this technology. This talk will be tomorrow in German. And then we will have the talk next week with Alexandra Kruse. We will talk with her about a new kind of authenticity that we show in the open world. We will talk about vulnerability. We will talk about
Astrology.
and her how can we say it? Her interpretations about the stars and how it is all connected and context. And it is always very interesting to listen to Alexandra's perspectives. The talk with Alexandra will be next Thursday. I think it's January 28th. And then there will be also a mindful painting workshop on Friday. And then we are already coming to an end with the Creative Festival. On Saturday, we have the musical experience with Pine and Stone, a live stream concert where we invite you to just get a little impression of how we can share culture and music together in this online space. It's all about vibrancies and voices and sounds, and we are really looking forward to the beautiful location at the VR residency where we are streaming live from it. Thanks already to Sarah from VN Residency to be our partner on that. So you see, we still have some beautiful events and we would love to see you there. The next talks will be in German. And it was very nice that you joined us here. And thank you very much, Michelle. It was so beautiful to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you. It was a pleasure. And thank you to our
Bye.
behind the scenes person as well.
So thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.